crash course. And maybe you know what a crash course is. I'll give you basically what I believe it to mean. A crash course means when you have to learn something on the fly, on the cusp, because there is a job or a task that is around the corner that you're needed to perform. And so you are taught a crash course in whatever it is to do that job or task. I'll give you an example. Whenever my wife was pregnant with our oldest, Sydney, we had made arrangements for my sister-in-law to be her birthing coach. And the reason why was because where I worked at the time, I did not have a regular schedule to be able to attend birthing classes, which has always struck me funny that you need to have a class to do such a thing. But anyway, that's a different story. So my sister-in-law was going to basically be the birthing coach for my wife. And so the day came when Sharon said to me, and I was off duty that day, she said, "I think today's the day." And I said, "Oh, let's go." And so she had a bag packed, and we jumped in the car, we drove to the hospital, and sure enough, today was the day. And so I picked up my phone and I called my sister-in-law and I said, "Cheryl, you need to get to the hospital." And my sister-in-law, Cheryl, said, "I can't." And I said, "Why not?" She said, "I have pink eye." I said, "You're kidding." She said, "No, I can't come to the hospital to be birthing coach with a newborn because I have pink eye." I said, "Well, okay." So I hung up the phone and the nurse began to give me a crash course in how to be a birthing coach. First time. Enough said. Sydney arrived without any problems. Really had nothing to do with the coach. I'm just telling you. But it was a crash course in how to do something. Usually when somebody says, "I need to teach you, I need to give you a crash course in how to do something," it's usually met with a couple of different reactions. The first reaction is, "I can't. It's not in my skill set to do what you're asking me to do." The second one is, "I won't." Third one is, "I don't have to." Fourth one might be, "I'll try." Fifth one might be, "I will." Sixth one might be, "I have to." Because if I don't, then it won't get done. And then 7 is a sense of urgency when that reaction is, "I must. I must." We're going to be in Hebrews chapter 11 today. And we're going to talk about this crash course that Paul teaches in the subject of faith. So if you have your Bibles, turn with me to Hebrews chapter 11. And then we're also going to merge into the first 2 verses of chapter 12. But we're going to process through this really pretty quickly. My watch says it's 11:08, and I promise I'll go as Speedy Gonzalez as I can possibly go. Before we jump in, though, I'm asking a prayer. Father God in heaven, these are your words. This is a part of the love letter of Scripture that is ordained by God for the purpose of teaching and rebuking, exhorting, training. So God, today I pray, as we look at how Paul gives a crash course in faith, God, may we be ready to receive it. Bless our people today. Pray, dear God, for comfort. Pray, dear God, for peace. Jesus, I pray for a yearning. May you be glorified. In Jesus' name. Everybody said. So, here's what we're going to begin with. Paul begins by giving us a definition of what faith means. So, chapter 11, if you have your Bibles open, you can follow along with me. This definition is real simple. Maybe you know it already. Faith is the substance of things not hope for, substance of things hoped for, and the evidence of things not seen. It's an abstract move to concrete. Faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. And after he gives this definition, he then gives 21 facets of the power of faith in action. 21 facets of the power of faith in action. You know what a facet is? If you have a precious stone in a ring, or even a cubic zirconia, or emerald, or ruby, diamond, whatever, the facet is the flat spot on the stone. And what makes a stone just dazzle in the light is all of the different facets together, how the stone cutter put all of the facets around on the edge of this stone to really just send the light beautifully through the stone. And so there are 21 facets of this precious gem of faith. And we're going to work through them really pretty quickly, okay? This is a crash course. First, we begin with a word of historical. If you'll notice in your sermon notes, you don't have anything but lines today. So if you want to just simply write down the words, these are the different facets. The first one is historical. Paul writes, through their faith, the people in days of old earned a good reputation. That means there's history in practicing faith in God. There's a history and evidence of people gone by who have trusted God before. That means that if there's history, then there's a possibility of continuity in this. The second facet is one of purpose. He says, by faith, we understand that the entire universe was formed at God's command, that what we now see did not come from anything that can be seen. In other words, it's not about how God created, but that God created. Why did God create? For intimate space between God the Father and mankind. He wanted that intimate relationship. That was the purpose that we trust in of God's creation. Number 3 is the word surrender. It was by faith that Abel brought a more acceptable offering to God than Cain did. Abel's offering gave evidence that he was a righteous man, and God showed his approval of his gifts. Although Abel is long dead, he still speaks to us by his example of faith. It is showing that Abel, in his offering, surrendered of the best of his best. And it was in this attitude of surrender that Abel, by faith, gave. Number 4 is this facet of death. It was by faith that Enoch was taken up to heaven without dying. He disappeared because God took him. For before he was taken up, he was known as a person who pleased God. And it is impossible to please God without faith. Anyone who wants to come to him must believe that God exists and that he rewards those who sincerely seek him. How cool is it that your faith in God is so great that whenever this idea of death, our mortality, comes to mind, it doesn't scare us, because we know that when this body stops, it continues in the presence of God. I love the idea of not being scared of death. The next one is tragedy. Sorry, I don't know where that came from. Tragedy. It was by faith that Noah built a large boat to save his family from the flood. He obeyed God, who warned him about things that had never happened before, as an unprecedented. By his faith, Noah condemned the rest of the world, and he received the righteousness that comes by faith. God says to Noah, I'm going to destroy mankind. There's a tragedy that is coming, but I've got plans for you. Because you trust me, I will provide a way for you. How cool is it that by faith we can see tragedy coming and know that God has our best interest at heart? This next facet is one of transition. It was by faith that Abraham obeyed when God called him to leave home and go to another land that God would give him as his inheritance. He went without knowing where he was going. And even when he reached the land God promised him, he lived there by faith, for he was a foreigner living in tents. And so did Isaac and Jacob, who inherited the same promise. Abraham was confidently looking forward to a city with eternal foundations, a city designed and built by God. In the face of transition, Abraham was faithful, and he went where God told him to go. The next one is a facet of covenant. Covenant. It was by faith that even Sarah was able to have a child. Though she was barren and was too old, she believed that God would keep his promise. And so a whole nation came from this one man who was as good as dead. A nation with so many people that, like the stars in the sky and the sand on the seashore, there is no way to count them. All these people died, still believing what God had promised them. They did not receive what was promised, but they saw it all from a distance and welcomed it. They agreed that they were foreigners and nomads here on earth. Obviously, people who say such things are looking forward to a country they can call their own. If they had longed for the country they came from, they could have gone back. But they were looking for a better place, a heavenly homeland. That's why God is not ashamed to be called their God. For he has prepared a city for them. You see, Sarah knew what God had promised her husband. And she said that even now, as I'm an old woman, God still has given a promise to my husband that we will have a nation birthed from my husband. And so I believe, even in my old age, that God will honor his covenant. The next one is obedience. It was by faith that Abraham offered Isaac as a sacrifice when God was testing him. Abraham, who had received God's promises, was ready to sacrifice his only son, even though God had told him, Isaac is the son through whom your descendants will be counted. Abraham reasoned that if Isaac died, God was able to bring him back to life again. And in a sense, Abraham did not receive his son. Abraham did receive his son back from the dead. God, I know what you've told me you were promising me to do, but I also hear what you're asking me to do now. So God, in my heart, I will obey what you say to do, trusting that even when it doesn't make sense, I will obey you. Even when it seems to contradict what you're telling me, God, I will obey what you tell me to do. By faith, Abraham walked in obedience. The next facet is one of generation. It was by faith that Isaac promised blessings for the future to his sons, Jacob and Esau. Now this is important because what we learn about faith is that it becomes generational. You see, when parents walk by faith in front of their children see firsthand how God works in their parents' lives. They see how God provides for the family in times when it doesn't make sense. And whenever their children see their parents walking in faith, then what happens is that their children grow up to know, I gotta trust God because I saw Mama doing it. I saw Daddy doing it. The next facet is one of worship. It was by faith that Jacob, when he was old and dying, blessed each of Joseph's sons and bowed in worship, even as he leaned on his staff. He purposed in that moment, not really knowing what the future held, but he was going to have a heart of praise. Even in a moment when all he could do was lean as an old and dying man, he purposed, I'm going to do this. And I'm going to worship my God who has made promises. The next facet is future. It was by faith that Joseph, when he was about to die, said confidently that the people of Israel would leave Egypt I love that. He said confidently that the people of Israel would leave Egypt. He even commanded them to take his bones with them when they left. Joseph didn't know what the future held, but he knew who held the future, and he knew what God had promised his grandpa. Great-grandpa. That God had promised Abraham land and legacy. And as God had promised this, as they were sitting in Egypt, Joseph knew that God wasn't done. Next, the facet is supernatural. It was by faith that Moses' parents hid him for 3 months when he was born. They saw that God had given them an unusual child, and they were not afraid to disobey the king's command. You see, the norm at the time was that the people of Israel lived in oppression in the land of Egypt. So the norm was that the king had said to kill all of the baby boys that were under 2 years old. And the norm is that their child was under 2 years old. But they saw in this child that he was different. That there was something supernatural about what God had anointed him to do. And they purposed to disobey what the king said because they saw something supernatural about to come about. Next is identity. This facet of identity. It was by faith that Moses, when he grew up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He chose to share the oppression of God's people instead of enjoying the fleeting pleasures of sin. He thought it was better to suffer for the sake of Christ than to own the treasures of Egypt. For he was looking ahead to his great reward. He said, "No, I refuse this title of being a child of the Pharaoh's daughter, and instead I know who I am as a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God." And he put his faith in God into his identity in such a way. The next word is missional. This next facet is missional. It was by faith that Moses left the land of Egypt, not fearing the king's anger. He kept right on going because he kept his eyes on the one who is invisible. That Moses would sit beside a burning bush and hear God say, "Go into Egypt and tell the Pharaoh to let my people go." And though he was scared, Moses went. And he was missional about this task. 10 plagues. He was missional. By faith, he was going to fulfill it. The next one is preparations. The next facet is preparations. It was by faith that Moses commanded the people of Israel to keep the Passover and to sprinkle blood on the doorposts so that the angel of death would not kill their firstborn sons. You see, the Lord told Moses to sacrifice a pure and spotless lamb and to collect the blood and wipe it on the doorposts. And when the death angel were to come that night, he would see the blood on the doorpost and he would pass over and not take the life of the firstborn son from that home. And so, as this is what the Lord told Moses, Moses in turn shared this with the people of Israel, and the people of Israel prepared for the Passover of the angel of death. And they were obedient, trusting that God would do this by faith. Not only was it the first occurrence, but they would continue every year now to celebrate and remember the Passover. The day when the Lord passed over and delivered the people of Israel. The next word is obstacle. How are we doing? Oh, I'm good. The next word is obstacle. It was by faith that the people of Israel went right through the Red Sea as though they were on dry ground. But when the Egyptians tried to follow, they were all drowned. I'm amazed by this because you see, when the obstacle of the Red Sea was right in front of them, the Lord simply told Moses to raise his arms. And as Moses raised his arms, the Lord parted the Red Sea. How wonderful is it that we can use this as a lesson for ourselves. And when obstacles come our way, we can trust that the Lord will provide a way through the obstacles. The next one is persistence. Persistence. It was by faith that the people of Israel marched around Jericho for 7 days, and the walls came crashing down. You see, they marched around the first day with gusto. Maybe the second day they said, oh man, this is really a long pathway. Third day, I don't want to do this. Y'all go instead. No, it was persistence. 7 days, they made the march. 7 days. God said, march around Jericho 7 days. Not 1 day, not 2 days, not 3 days. He said 7 days. And so they marched with persistence. And to know that by persistently believing in the God who loves us, we know that He carries out His promises. The next one is observance. I like this one. It was by faith that Rahab the prostitute was not destroyed by the people in her city who refused to obey God, for she had given a friendly welcome to their spies. Do you know why I like this one? It's because the promises of land and legacy had not been made to her or her people, but she had seen the evidence of God. Carrying the people of Israel to the Jordan River, and here the Jordan River back up, and the people of Israel cross over. And she said, I want to be on your team. And so when the spies came into Jericho, and she harbored them, she told them, remember me and my family when you attack. And it wasn't even her promises, but she said, no, I want a part of that. The next two are kind of group study a little bit. The next one is power. How much more do I need to say? It would take too long to recount the stories of the faith of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, David, Samuel, and all the prophets. By faith, these people overthrew kingdoms, ruled with justice, and received what God had promised. By faith, they shut the mouths of lions, quenched the flames of fire, and escaped death by the sword. Their weakness was turned to strength. They became strong in battle and put whole armies to flight. Women received their loved ones back again from death. What else can I say? By faith, God's power moved in amazing, mighty ways. I'm not trying to tell you all of these wonderful ways in which it's happened. The next one is trials. But others were tortured, refusing to turn from God in order to be set free. They placed their hope in a better life after the resurrection. Some were jeered at, and their backs were cut open with whips. Others were chained in prison. Some died by stoning, some were sawed in half, and others were killed with the sword. Some went about wearing skins of sheep and goats. The destitute and oppressed and mistreated, they were too good for this world, wandering over deserts and mountains, hiding in caves and holes in the ground. Even in the midst of their trials, they knew that God had something bigger and better planned for them. Which brings us to the final facet in this gemstone of faith. That's reward. All these people earned a good reputation because of their faith. Yet none of them received all that God had promised in this life. For God had something better in mind for us. so that they would not reach perfection without us. By faith, there is a reward that God has in mind. Sometimes that reward comes in blessings in this life, but that's not the reward that we're talking about. The big reward is in eternity, in the presence of God. No pain, no need, no hurt, no anxiety, no alarm clocks, no cancer. Intimacy with God the Father forever and ever and ever. By faith. This is the crash course of Paul. So let me show you a little bit about the Nichols by faith story. In 2002, we had an open roof in a rainstorm. We lived in Edmonton. And it was the day of my oldest daughter's birthday party. And the rains came and did thousands of dollars worth of damage to our house. The insurance helped cover it. The problem was that it threw us into a financial tailspin. And we found ourselves, over the course of the next 2 years, behind. By the beginning of 2003, we were 2 mortgage payments behind. And we had to sell a car that actually lost money on in the sale. There was one time when we actually had to break open the piggy bank so we could have enough money to buy some groceries to get us to the next paycheck. And at the time, I was working for a coffee company, and I knew the prayer of Jabez, oh, bless me indeed and increase my territory. And so I knew this as kind of an incantation, as a rub the magic plant kind of prayer, And so I even tried to learn it in Hebrew. But God, oh, bless me indeed and increase my territory. Oh, bless me indeed and increase my territory. Oh, God, bless me indeed and increase my territory. It wouldn't work. In the early part of January 2003, I'm driving in my Ford Aerostar minivan coffee truck, going to Ponca City, Oklahoma, and the radio is off, and I am praying. My prayer had moved from, oh, bless me indeed and increase my territory, to, God, you got to get us out of this hole. God, you got to get us out of this hole. It's an hour-and-a-half trip from my home to Ponca City, and I would probably venture to tell you that I probably said, oh, God, you got to get us out of this hole, probably 300 to 400 times. If somebody were passing me in the passing lane, they would have seen this really red-faced man with vessels sticking out on the side of his neck as I was screaming at the windshield, oh God, you've got to get us out of this hole. Anybody else ever been there? It was about mile marker 100. But I had this really, really strong wake-up call. And I realized that here I am praying this prayer, oh God, bless me and increase my territory. When I realized that I hadn't been blessing Him. I hadn't been offering any kind of a prayer of praise. God, you are the Almighty God. It was in that moment, luckily, mile marker 103 was a truck stop. And I pulled over, I put it in park, and I said, God, I'm so sorry. I said, God, this is what I'm going to ask you for. I'm going to ask you for a heart of praise. And whatever may come, that I will bless you because you're the God of the universe. If we lose our house, I want to praise you. If we have to live on the street, I want to praise you. I want a heart of praise regardless of what happens. A week later or so, I got a phone call from a friend of mine named Wes. Wes was on on the board for the Church of the Nazarene in Ponca City, St. Louis. And he calls me and he says, Monty, our pastor has resigned and gone to Africa for the Jesus Film Project, and our worship pastor has also gone to Colorado because of his ill-paying job. So we don't have any leadership. Would you mind just driving up on Sunday mornings, lead our worship, and then you can drive back and we'll pay you? And I said, sure. And so I began to drive up on Sunday mornings, lead worship, get done, and drive back home. All the time, there were still 2 mortgage payments behind. In April of 2003, the church hired a pastor. And in the 1st of May, I told the pastor, I said, I'm glad you're here, but this is killing me, driving back and forth on Sundays like this. So I want to ask that you allow me to bow gracefully. And he said, well, wait a minute, what if we were to have you come and be our worship pastor here at the church? And I said, well, if that's what God wants, remember, give me a heart of praise, God, whatever you want to do. If that's what God wants, I'm willing, but there's several things that need to happen. 1, we have to sell our house. 2, we have to be able to pay off our debt. 3, I have to have a full-time job. I have to have a place to live. My wife has to have a job. And my children have to be excited about moving to Ponca City. And my wife has to be excited about moving to Ponca City. We sold our house within $400 of our asking price. We paid off almost all of our debt. There was a family in the church that rented us a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 2,600 square foot house for $500 a month. The church, while they offered me a salary package that was less than what I was making at the coffee company, was enough to pay our bills with the new debt ratio that we had, and we sure didn't have to get a job right away. When we told the girls that we had something to tell you, and Shelby said, I know, we're moving to Ponca City. And we kind of just turned and looked at each other and said, are you okay with that? And Shelby said, yeah. And then Sharon turned around and looked at me and she said, I guess we're moving to Ponca City. And so by faith, we went to Ponca City. And we were part of an amazing church there for 4 years. And then in May of 2007, we get a phone call from Rodney Doerr, the former pastor here. And he said, hey, I need an associate pastor who can do youth and music. And I said, well, okay, who are you going to call? Because I'm 41 years old. I'm too old to be a youth pastor. He goes, well, I'll talk to you. So I prayed about it for 2 months. And then the end of August, I came 2007. And my family came in November. And when I first came to do youth ministry here, I think we had 3 teams. We had as many as 40 during the course of my time as a youth pastor. And God was good. I poured a lot of life. Did some amazing things. Got shrink wrapped to that pole out there. It was awesome. 2010 was a rough year, though. 2010 was really trying. Sharon had gotten a job with Eastern Workforce Investment Board. And in September of 2010, she calls me and she says, Monty, I just got fired. We talked for a little bit. What are we going to do? Because we're a 2-income family. And we finished our conversation and I hung up the phone. This is what I prayed. God, I'm not going to ask you for a single thing. By faith, I know that you know all about what's going on. So by faith, I will praise you. By faith, I will trust that you have our interests at heart. That was September. October, Rodney pulled me into his office and said he was resigning as a pastor of this church. Which means that as an associate pastor, I had to resign too. So great. Now we're both going down. the board was gracious, and we prayed about what to do. The church told me we're going to stick around and see how this rides out. In November, my mother died of cancer. That was a rough year. But God is faithful. God is so faithful. In December, I talked to the board about the possibility of interviewing for the lead pastor role because I felt like that was where God was telling me to go. And so I kind of tag teamed with John Williamson, who was the interim pastor, and we together kind of alternated Sundays to preach. And come March, Sharon got a job with the Oklahoma Small Business Development Center. And there were great things that began to happen. And in June, the church voted to install me as the lead pastor for this church, 2011. By faith, we have made this walk. And I will tell you right now, first and foremost, that you cannot go wrong by trusting God with your life. You cannot go wrong. I have lived it firsthand. I've seen how all of this has happened. You see, whenever Sharon lost her job in September of 2010, I said, God, I'm not even going to worry about it. And you know, for 6 months, we never were behind on any payments. There was always food in the cupboard, and the rent was always paid on time. God provided over and over and over again. In this church, we've seen some crazy stuff over the last 7 years. But we've also seen some wonderful things as God has brought healing. As God has restored people. The Spirit of God's moved fantastically on us. By faith, we have walked this journey. By faith, we have to step away. My wife worked her way up from being a regional advisor to being a center director to being an assistant state director. Last week, she was extended a job invitation in Mississippi as a state director for the Mississippi Small Business Development Center. By faith, we have walked this journey with you. And God has been so good. This last 9 months have been just incredible. Standing on a beautiful makeover platform that to watch it be done was phenomenal. During the summer months, the vacation months, there were 50 first-time visitors coming to this church. Amen. Why? Because God's working here. God's building His kingdom here. God's not done here. And this crash course in faith is an important lesson because right now, I've shared with you this crash course, and there's going to be some who are going to say, I can't. There's going to be some who say, I won't. There will be some who will say, I'll try. There will be some who say, I must. This is God's church. We are His people. Paul continues to write in chapter 12, therefore, since we are surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses,